Hi everyone, it's me, Nanny Annie again. I'm sorry I haven't been speaking to you for the last few days, but you'll be pleased to know that I've been busy writing some more stories for you so I can tell you lots of stories as the days go on. The other thing was that in the UK and the rest of Europe, there was a 75th anniversary at the end of the Second World War in Europe. And everybody was outside, socially distancing, of course, sitting at the ends of their driveways or their gardens and having tea and cakes and celebrating and singing. And it was just such a lovely day. And that happened all over Europe. Now, in Asia, and I've got family who live in Asia, in Australia and Malaysia, and I've got some really wonderful friends in Singapore. They had to wait really until September when the war was officially ended over there. Now this got me thinking that of my grandparents and what it was like for them during the war, because we're in lockdown at the moment and we're in a war with this horrible virus, aren't we? We're trying to prevent the virus from spreading and making us sick, and in some cases making us really poorly that we die. And so we're trying to protect each other. So I thought, what was it like for my grandparents when the war was declared? Now, let me tell you something about my family. I had my grandmother, my grandma, and my granddad, and they lived in Liverpool, and they had 13 children. Can you imagine 13 children sharing a little house and then war being declared? Now, my nin, that's my mum's mum, we lived with her when we were growing up, and she was all on her own during the war because my granddad died before the war was declared. So she had 9 children, but only 7 of them lived. And so there were 7 brothers and sisters living together in a little house when the war broke out, with only my grandma to look after them, my ninny. Well, I was thinking, well, what happened? How did they feel? Well, one of the things they had to do was a lot of the men went off to fight in the war, which left the women looking after the children and doing jobs that in those days was normally done by men. They were driving ambulances, they were driving fire engines, they were working in factories, making munitions and weapons for our armies and to fight. They were even in shipbuilding, building ships and aeroplanes, because there were very few men left to actually do the work. My nin worked in a restaurant because she had 7 young children that she had to look after, and so there was no one else there to help her, so she had to get on with that. My granddad and my nana, my grandma, I don't know a lot about what they did during the war, because my dad didn't really speak about it much, but my mum did, because she was only young when the war broke out in Europe, and she thought, it was all like a game, really. She said that they had to go into a shelter when the sirens went off at the night, because the planes from Germany who were at war with us were bombing us and dropping bombs on our homes. So they went into what they call an air raid shelter overnight. And some of her friends had a little garden, and they had what they call an Anderson shelter, which was a tin hut really, buried more or less in the ground and covered with earth. And when the sirens went off, no matter what time of night it was, they all had to go into the Anderson shelter, which was really cold and damp, and they had to stay there until the siren went off again to sound the all clear and saying, okay, you can go back to bed again. But really what happened was it didn't sound the all clear until morning. So can you imagine being in the pitch dark, sitting in a tin shed, cold and damp, listening to all the planes flying across and just hoping and keeping your fingers crossed like this that they won't come anywhere near your house. So, and your house would still be there in the morning. There were other big air raid shelters all around Liverpool for people who didn't have gardens and couldn't have the Anderson shelter. And so they would get up and they were down in the subways, and people would go down there in the night and just stay there, just waiting until the all clear sounded. So Liverpool was one of the cities like London that was very, very badly hurt with the bombs being dropped on them, because there was a lot of industry and the Germans just wanted to make sure that, we couldn't make the aeroplanes and we couldn't make the ships, so they were trying to bomb the city. Well, what happened was that the government then decided that they'd send all the little children away to Wales and the countryside to get them away from London and Liverpool and all the big cities that they were in danger of being bombed. So they put them all on a train and they all went off. My mum and a sister and a brother went to Wales. And can you imagine what it was like going to stay with a stranger that you didn't know and leave all your family and your mum, and you're thinking, oh, wow, what's this going to be like? At first it was a little bit of an adventure, but they got really homesick. Well, my mum and her sister and brother went to live with this Welsh lady who wasn't very nice. And that's not saying that all Welsh people are not very nice, because that's not true, because everybody was staying with some beautiful families who really looked after them and loved them and kept them safe. But this Welsh lady that my mum was staying with didn't particularly like the children very much, and she wasn't really that nice to them. And after they'd been there for about a year, my uncle had an accident. Well, really it wasn't an accident, because my mum, what she did was playing cowboys and Indians with her sister and her brother, and he said to her, hide behind the door and hit me on top of the head with the gun, pretend to hit me. So she thought, okay, well, she was only young and she didn't know that pretending meant you didn't actually hit him. And so when he came past the door, she whacked him on the head. So he fell down as if he was dead. He wasn't dead, he was just unconscious because she'd hit him so hard. Well, when my grandmother had to come and see him, and she saw the children had not been looked after and the woman was not keeping them safe, she said, come on, you're going back to Liverpool. You'd be safer living with the bombs and the air raids than staying here. So she took them back to Liverpool, and the kids, when there was an air raid, used to hide under the big farmhouse kitchen table to keep safe. But from then on, they just enjoyed the war. They were out playing with their friends during the day, because there was very, very little problems from aircraft during the day. It mostly all went at night. So all the kids thought it was a real adventure. Well, at the end of the war, people started to rejoice and they were dancing in the street because it was the end of the war in Europe, and everyone was really, really happy, except those that are living in Asia, because they'd been invaded by the Japanese army, because the Japanese supported Hitler and decided that they wanted to make sure that they controlled all the world. So all the different countries got together and fought them. America and fought the Japanese until in the September the Japanese surrendered and that was it, the end of the Second World War, which means that in September we'll have another big celebration because that was the end of the Second World War. Now, that I was thinking, we're like living in lockdown. But it's not the same as going to the bottom of your garden and bombs being dropped on you. We've just got this horrible virus that we're trying to make sure none of us catch and none of us give it to each other. So that's why we're staying and socially isolating from each other, that we're not going to school and we're not doing our football or our gymnastics, and we're not doing anything like that, and we're not seeing our nannies where we can give them big cuddles and kisses, but we're trying to keep each other safe. Now, what I want you to remember is that at the end of the war, Germany was really, really sorry that what happened, that Hitler did, because they suffered during the war as well, because everybody was fighting them. And the Japanese were very, very sorry. But now with this virus, it's like a war for us, that we're trying to keep each other safe. But every single country in the world are our friends now, because all of our countries are trying to find a cure or a treatment for the virus so that all of us all over the world can live safe and basically get on with being kids and loving our families and cuddling each other. And that's what's going to happen, because we're all our friends, we're all joined together, every country, to try and make us all safe. So I wanted to just share that with you, if that's okay. I'll speak to you in a minute, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a second video today and tell you a story. Bye for now.